All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eric Johnson, and I am an Associate Dean of Equity and Inclusion for College of Education, and also the chair of the WSU College of Ed Equity and Inclusion Committee. And we sponsor these critical conversations, so we're really happy that you're able to join us for this presentation. Um, Especially I'm in the Tri-Cities, so we're getting hit with some snow here.
Mhm.
And there were a number, almost 30 people who registered, so we'll probably see some more folks pop in, but I'm really grateful that you all registered and could navigate that system to get in. We are, whoops, holding four of these presentations across the semester, one a month. And we are going to be hearing from Professor Dunn here in a moment. We have another one in March on the 20th, and then we have one in April. So keep your eyes out for those announcements, and it'll be the same process. Uh, and we tried to vary them between, different days, Wednesdays and Thursdays to accommodate everybody's schedule. Okay. So with that, I'm really excited to hand this off to Professor Dunn and see his wonderful presentation. So I'll stop my screen and yeah, you're good, Michael. Whenever you want to share, I'll
Great.
keep an eye on the chat and
Thank you.
we try to do these. It's a presentation, but we try to do it as a conversation. So if you have questions, feel free to jump in. Some people put stuff in the chat. I'm here to moderate, and I can hop in if there's a question, Michael.
Hmm.
During my classes, I'm horrible at keeping an eye on the the chat, but
Yeah,
a little
me
easier when
too.
you have an extra pair of eyes. So yeah, Michael,
Sure.
go ahead. We're really excited to have your presentation today.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate it. And I prefer this kind of view. I don't know if it's big enough for people to see on their screens.
Can you
Or
do presentation mode so it'll make the slides bigger?
like,
Yeah, that made it bigger.
okay. Um, okay. So yeah, tonight's talk is about writing, and I'm taking kind of a wide scope view of writing. I'm trying to hit a lot of the what I think what research has told us, what my teaching experience and my interaction with other teachers of writing and researchers of writing, policymakers about writing, etc., um, feel are key topics. So there's no really like elementary focus per se. It's really K through 12 through to adulthood. So whatever your personal perspective or current role, you should find at least a few things that are topical to you and how you think about writing and maybe how you approach the teaching of writing, the practice of writing in the future. And this is related to an equity and inclusion grant that I got for the website that I'm building as a writing hub of strategies, tools, links to things that exist on the web elsewhere. And I put the link here at the very bottom here, and we'll come back to this later. And included for the grant that I got is adding to the strategy videos and infographics are ideas to help people, teachers, students, parents use writing as a mean of communication and conversation, and therefore encourage more discussion about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Um, so that's kind of the some of the overarching goals, main thoughts about this. I am not here to lecture tonight for sure, so I very much welcome your thoughts and ideas, and there will be different ways for you to do that. One is through the chat. Another one is there's a series of Menti web things that I've created at different points. So whether you're in a breakout session, You can add a comment or a keyword, and they'll all kind of collect together for us to see kind of an overall summary. And as part of that, the breakout rooms that I've put in the presentation periodically for you and with a small group of people to be able to discuss some of these topics. And there's also these green conversation boxes at different slides where I've put kind of like conversation starters for perhaps you to enter something in the chat or to um, comment here together with us your ideas about that particular subtopic. So, um, yeah, so the welcome, as I mentioned, the perspectives and experiences with writing. Why some students have difficulty is a key component that I wanted to touch on, some strategy and practice ideas. And again, that idea of promoting a community for all with the writing website I mentioned and ideas to use writing as a means to converse and dialogue with others. And I'd also welcome your feedback on tonight's presentation. So you can use that QR code or link. Um, so any kind of comments you have about what you found useful, suggestions, etc., would be helpful and appreciated. So just a little bit about me. I'm originally from Nova Scotia, Canada. You can see the red section here on the map. I grew up in a small inland village, and my father had complete hearing loss at age 12. He contracted scarlet fever, and it burned off the nerve endings in his ears. And he just became completely deaf at grade 6, and he had to stop school, and he began working. And he was a hard worker. So he managed, and with my mother and two older sisters, we would help accommodate for him with the telephone and correspondence letters that would come and help him to be able to understand. My high school was small. It had 500 students, and I participated in student government. I was president of Junior and Senior Students Council and played trombone in the concert and jazz bands. And then after high school, I went to Dalhousie University in Halifax. And Dalhousie is kind of what the UW is to the Seattle area. It's the big research university with the law school and the med school and the dental school and all kinds of things that go on. It's the main research university of the region. And I graduated in 1991 as a second language teacher, grade 7 through 12. And I managed to find employment in Toronto, um, a community next door called Mississauga, and worked there for 11 years in K through 8 schools, and taught a series of different things. And I did a master's degree in literacy part-time the last 3 years that I was there. And that led to me going to Indiana University Bloomington, where I did my PhD, and then came here to Vancouver in 2005. So yeah, I definitely wanted to start off early with the idea that I really believe that we need to work towards being a community for all of us, being respectful and civil to everyone in our social interactions and however they might define themselves, whatever their background, that we be respectful and civil towards others. And that people be offered and provided what they need, not necessarily that everybody gets the same thing, but if someone needs an additional piece of technology or more strategy instruction to help them be able to really get the concept or improve, that's okay because that's helping them to be able to make progress like we all want to make progress. And providing for people to access and improve in all aspects of life wherever they are. This is a key thing about inclusion. Um, at least in special education, sometimes people will slip into the phrase inclusion classrooms. And at least I really frown on that. I think of general education classrooms. Inclusion really should be happening and can happen anywhere. So if it's a general education classroom, if it's the bus stop, if it's the grocery store, the public library, wherever people might convene and come together, be present, there should be inclusion practices offered at each one of those types of locations, so that we're all being part of, the social experience of life and having the opportunity to experience and excel. So, this is meant to start off kind of the conversation, and it's a breakout room. And I'm suggesting 10 minutes for the breakout rooms and that they be random assignment each time. So these are some of the questions, like what are your earliest memories of writing texts? Who who did you see writing as a child, as a model? Did your teachers model how to write? And kind of how did that work? And did that help you? And finally, what has helped you improve with your writing skills over time? So in the breakout, there is a Menti um, webpage that you can go to, and you can make notes. Um, and therefore, when we come back together, we'll have kind of an overall summary that I and us all together can see.
Great. So
And
I did some breakout rooms, did groups of 3 and some 2. What I have my students do is take a picture of the screen that you're seeing right now, just with your phone. That way you'll have access to the prompts and um, and the QR code. So do this 10 minutes. Okay. All right. Does everybody have a picture of it so you see the prompts? Very cool. All right. And Michael, you'll be in a room as well. Is that
yeah,
okay?
I'll probably join one. Yes, thank you.
Okay. We'll see you in 10 minutes. It's like we have everybody back.
My audio was off for some reason. Um, I'm thinking you're able to see the Menti summary here as the screen moves, as I
You
move.
have to share your screen again.
I have to share my screen again.
Yeah.
Ooh, that okay. Now you can see. Um, yeah, so these are the comments that people wrote, and um, for me, it was a lot of textbook in school. So we would arrive at a given class, you'd read the portion for that day, 3 or 4 paragraphs. There'd be a class discussion, and then there would be questions to write out answers to. So we'd be working away on that. And then there'd be maybe some teaching by the teacher and then the description of the homework. And then we kind of went to the next class and did it all over again. So, I mean, you do what you are told to do. And I was in a cohort of high achievers. So we always, wanted to get the highest grades we could. So we were very compliant and didn't really feel that we had a voice to be able to, ask for something different. And because we really hadn't experienced anything different, I think a lot of us felt we didn't know what to ask for, which is interesting and would be an interesting thing to be able to try to provoke change. I suppose times are different today, and with social media, there's a lot more ideas and access to those ideas floating around. But for me, it was really when I was doing my master's thesis that I got a professional editor to help me through the content of the document. And that was a huge help to me, and it really turned on all kinds of light bulbs. And I felt much better about being able to manage writing on my own going forward. So this whole idea of feedback and, really thinking through what it is that you're putting in words on the page really does make the difference. And the idea that you're writing for the reader. And that was something I think, really came to light to me at that point was you're writing for the other people. You already know what you know. You don't need to retell it to yourself. Um, so those were huge helps to me for sure. Um, so we will, I guess I have to restart the presenter view. Or is this big enough? I just continue with this. Does this work? Yeah. Okay. So here's another Menti, but I wasn't thinking that we would go into a breakout room at this point if people could just make notes in the Menti. But what do you see as university and college student skills as readers and writers? Or if currently you're a college level student, like how you feel about writing currently, um, strengths, weaknesses, things that you feel challenged by, if you're an instructor, kind of what you see as things that could help or what students, common things that they struggle with, etc. So again, the QR code, a link, or those four numbers should get you there.
Michael, I'm sorry, just a clarification. Are you thinking, or was the question what we observe are college student skills and readers or as readers and writers, or what we would value as skills needed?
Yeah, so yeah, like in the experience of being at the college university level, what do you see as student skills as readers and writers? So
Yeah, thank
things
you.
that they do well with, or maybe things that could benefit from more help with. Um, that was kind of the idea.
I taught a lot of math, not pay my students to read. It's just like
Hmm.
um, I remember once after like week 12, he said, "Wait, we have a textbook? Wait, it's
Hmm.
week 12. How do you not know that?"
Right.
so,
Right.
so
Well,
that's
I
my pretty,
appreciate.
first was absent, but
Hmm.
I'm a math teacher, so right,
Hmm.
um, I tried to push a lot of reading on them because I knew it was a huge skill, and I teach
Sure.
math as a language, but
Hmm.
it
Very
didn't
good.
work well. Um,
Well, looking at the words here that have been posted, I appreciate the emphasis on education, educational. Certainly, the process of learning is really important. And another keyword I see like analyzation and analysis. Um, the Common Core State Standards, have the objective of college and career readiness of K through 12 students to get prepared for the argumentative culture of universities and colleges where, we're taking data, we're trying to summarize data, we're trying to apply it to a situation to create some kind of experiment or intervention study, such as in writing, and see how that kind of plays out and then write up the results. And um, argumentative writing requires the use of references, of sources, to substantiate the claims, similarities in what you found, or um, things that maybe be the opposite of what other research said, whatever it might be. So it's a very high level of writing. Each of the genres of writing, pose their own challenges, but argumentative does require a lot. And the thing about argumentative writing is it's not something that we do for pleasure reading necessarily. Like when students arrive at a STEM class to write a lab report, that's kind of a new thing for them often. I mean, if it was writing a narrative story, we've been seeing that many times throughout K through 12. And there are, of course, STEM classes in public school and science, etc. But often it's not as much for pleasure reading and therefore less well known for university students to be able to manage easily, at least at the start. Certainly there are underdeveloped students in the United States. According to the most recent National Assessment of Educational Progress assessment for writing, only 25% of students, grades 8 and 12, I think it was, who could write at a proficient level. 75% cannot do that, according to that test. And it's the most national summative kind of assessment that we have in terms of that kind of data. But I think most teachers would say that writing often is a real challenge for many children. And AI, artificial intelligence, we'll be talking about that too, offers a lot of possibilities. But I kind of think of it as, I don't know if this is the best example, but going to buy a new car. Like there's lots of new cars and they look nice. So when you ask AI to provide you with a text, it probably looks nice, but have you done your research, for example, on the car to know when you go to a certain dealer and you look at that car, is it really the car that you would want? Does it pose any possible problems that you can see immediately while you're looking at it? So are you a good consumer, right, of being able to go buy a good car? And it's similar with AI. You have to know what you're looking at to be able to judge if it really is of something of value that can really be useful to you, but also in a way that is not plagiarism, which is a huge risk. So AI doesn't really replace the need for being able to be and know that you are a good writer. It's certainly a help, but it's not a quick fix, I would say. Okay, so how writing can be challenging then. So my quick list. One is, as was mentioned by some people in my breakout session group, the benefits of being an avid reader. It really is important to be reading every day, reading high quality texts. And it really helps with teaching a university level class to provide students with a high quality example of the kind of text that you're asking students to write. It gives them an idea of the formatting, the content, and kind of how it's structured. Of course, we don't want them to copy paste, and that's not the intent or what should be allowed, that they write on a different topic from the example. But seeing high quality examples and being that avid reader, thinking through what this writer has written, how they've structured it, and therefore being able to apply that in your own writing can be really, really helpful. Number two, idea generation. Yeah, we need to know where to start. We need to know what kind of topic we want to choose to be able to begin writing. And unfortunately, many students who struggle with writing also struggle with reading, and therefore they are not avid readers, and therefore they tend not to know what some idea choices could be when you ask them to begin writing a text. So this is where the interplay of things amongst this list really begin to work against each other and kind of have a negative impact one on the other. So without being the avid reader, you have less of an idea of what a topic could be for your own writing. Students can struggle with spelling. but there are certainly web apps like Grammarly, Microsoft Editor, etc., that can help correct those errors, which is certainly very helpful. For students with a learning disability in writing, a few minutes of practice each day is considered best practice, but we're never going to repair, to heal, to solve the challenges with memory that students with a learning disability experience, unfortunately. So those spelling challenges will likely be lifelong, and that's why accommodations are so important. And then, of course, as you're trying to choose words and to spell them, then you have to map them into a cohesive sentence. And those sentence ideas become paragraphs. And those paragraphs begin to represent text structure. So the beginning, middle, and end of your text. And once you have finished a first draft, you then need to go back and edit for syntax and grammar, and also revise ideas so that you can finesse for a final copy. And for people who, have typically achieving memory skills, attentional skills, and are avid readers and can, with others and on their own, be able to look at a high quality text and see how it's structured and begin to apply that, these steps become more and more fluid and help to make the whole process easier, more manageable, and more achievable. But for students who struggle with attention and memory, reading, spelling, etc., these steps become very difficult. And often we need to provide them with accommodations like web tools, the editing web apps that I mentioned, strategy instruction, those kinds of things to really be able to help them better manage a given type of text and what the steps are in that strategy to be able to help them through to get to some type of representative text of what they should have.
And Michael, we had a really good comment by David in the chat. He's saying that argumentative writing and debate require a tacit agreement on how to prove something is real, right? So the information age, many people just run, well, if so-and-so says it's true, then it's true. So that, to me, that blurs with, like, social media, people repost stuff that they don't ever fact check. Or, but then applying it, I know with graduate students, you try to get them to be able to format a paper and be able to cite stuff. And a lot of times they'll just cite it because they read something and they don't critically read it, or they miscite it, or they do secondary citations. And so a lot of this, like, you can get folks who are really finessed at the revisions and the editing and the flow of the narrative, but do you have any recommendations on how to set a baseline for what your claims are and the citations, the so-and-so said, like, have you had experience with that? And I do that heavily with my graduate students, but at another layer, right? High school, middle school, to get them to check. Just because it's written doesn't mean it's real or it's valid.
Yeah. Well, I did a study at the School for the Blind here in the Washington State School for the Blind here in Vancouver on argumentative writing, and having them look at sources and what they were saying, and we kind of discussed them to get a better understanding and then how to apply it. So yeah, to me, it would be through that discussion phase with peers that I think would help clarify what sources are saying and what we can write about them and how far we should go. I think that would be my thought. Does that help answer the comment?
Yeah, David, you go ahead and backfill. I was taking it in a direction of, they get really good at citing and saying, well, this is the claim, but not looking into that claim.
Mm.
before making those statements. So David, sorry if I took it in a different direction, but I appreciate your comment.
Oh, you're muted.
David, jokes are always funnier when you're not muted.
Yeah.
Yeah. I went to a math education seminar once, and the big topic one day was proof. And how do we
Mm.
know that something is true? And they did a survey with a bunch
Mm.
of kids, and I remember a bunch of middle school kids. Basically, the majority of them said, "Well, if the teacher says it's true, then it's true." And that's not necessarily the truth. Just it's
Mm-hmm.
I always told my math students, don't believe me. Don't believe anything I say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm proving to you, hopefully, that it's true. Just because I
Yeah,
say it's true doesn't mean it is true.
right.
Um,
I know Kristen Lessick here in Vancouver has talked about proofs sometimes with her students, and yeah, that's a whole kind of topic on its own and how math kind of views that from what
yeah.
I can gather.
And
So
I
it's
did do proof
interesting.
writing in some courses I took, so or
Okay,
I taught. So
right.
yeah.
Another comment that people have mentioned to me is the importance of not just reading the abstract of a research article, but actual much of the content. Because sometimes, while the abstract is good, it doesn't necessarily represent everything that's in the article. So the importance of reading the actual article too um, is important and helpful in that. Yeah, so um, as I mentioned, the benefits of being an avid reader, and I kind of walked through this. Would anyone like to comment about their reading? I know the people in my breakout session did a bit. Um, like, do you read for pleasure or is it just textbooks? Do you have access or are you provided with high quality examples um, from your instructor or as an instructor to your students before they write an assignment? Have you had any experiences with that, with how that's been helpful to you?
I know what's helpful is I'm all about examples. And so when I have the different criteria that I want them to integrate into their papers, I'll post, previous student work and I'll like circle it or indicate where they're doing certain things so they understand how to connect ideas, from an actual peers or previous, students' experience with that
Mhm.
assignment. And that has been helpful.
Mhm. Mhm.
I've done a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
don't
myself.
have a lot of, oh, someone was going to speak.
Yeah, I've done that too with proofs. Here's my version of how it was proved. Compare it with
Mhm.
yours.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of time to read for pleasure, to be honest. Being a professor, there's so much. I read a lot of emails and I try to read, articles to incorporate into my own manuscripts for publishing. I I wish I did have more time for pleasure. I hope to one day have more time. But yeah, it seems that a lot of the time I have for reading needs to be really focused on what would really most help me be able to accomplish my tasks, and how reading plays a part of that. I do provide high quality examples in my courses, which students say they appreciate. So I think that's a really good and helpful practice at any grade level. I mean, even elementary school, the teachers walking through an example of the writing assignment or creating an example with the class before individual students are expected to write is really helpful for them to get a better understanding and see what the components of that text are supposed to be.
Christy had a good comment about like audiobooks,
Mhm.
which I find myself doing too, because it's like if you
Mhm.
mow lawns for a living, last thing you want to do after 8 hours of mowing lawns is come and mow your own lawn. Right.
Mhm.
And so I can empathize. But like in a car, or those times when you can't be sitting down, right, with your cup of coffee and reading, like, so, what are your ideas around helping students connect audio books with
Mhm.
the writing process?
Oh, screen readers are a huge help for sure. And in some of my projects, I've had students like speak their story before they began writing their first draft, which was another opportunity for them to organize, think about their ideas and how they sequenced in the timeline of their story before they got confronted, bogged down with spelling words and sentences and trying to create text. So yeah, the idea of audio, um, speaking ideas and stories, the content of what they're about to write can be very, very helpful. Yeah, for sure. For idea generation, it's interesting how people vary about this. I do so much of this in my head. I don't tend to make an outline per se. And someday I feel I should really try and see how that works out. I feel I'm more efficient. It'll take me less time if I just do it in my head and kind of organize my thoughts, and then I use my mental outline to begin writing. But does anyone have their own preferred way that they have found helpful?
I tend to speak my thoughts into a notes page, whether I'm hiking or cleaning or folding laundry.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I love outlines, and even with big, intimidating documents like dissertations, I have the students break it into sections, and then, break each section into sections, and then write stuff in there. It just to see words organized on a page without, you know, hammering out big narratives at the beginning is helpful for some people. I mean, it is personally for me, but um, I think it'd be I, Christy, that's great. I don't know if I could listen to myself talk. But yeah, there are multiple ways of providing students with strategies for organizing
Mhm.
thoughts.
Mhm.
I actually had this today because I was subbing out of the middle school today in the 8th grade class. Um, and there's one lady there with she's in special education, and the assignment was simple. They just finished with a book, and they had to write an alternate book cover, so they could draw on it. They had to have the name and title. And the back of it had to have 5 sentences, a little summary, like on the back of most books, right?
Mhm.
And she's like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do this. This is too much. I'm not going to do this. And I give her a couple of prompts. Who is your favorite character? And she told me. And then, what did you like about them? And then I'm not going to do it. And a couple other questions. I'm not going to do it. But I provided some prompts like this. I just kind of let her tell me I'm not going to do it a few times. And I backed off. And then 10 minutes later, I see she's written half a page, you know
Mhm.
but when it was first a blank piece of paper, she had nothing to do with. But then after, like I said, I just asked her a bunch of questions about the book that she read, and then
Mhm.
she did a great job of writing.
Mhm.
So just something
Great.
happened today for me.
That's good. Thank you. For academics, I find the challenge is finding a topic that's new, novel, extends the research topic in a new way. So if you're trying to find a topic for a new grant or a new research study, um, that's the challenge. And managing it in a way that you can get it done in a manageable amount of time to be able to write the manuscript and get it published. And yeah, one of the great challenges we face in academia. So the idea of spelling, wow. Um, I don't know if these diagrams are familiar to you. Um, the one on the left is the one I prefer. It comes from an older textbook, which I meant to reference in here, and forgot, but educational psychologists have, you know, done their research and developed their suggestion, their ideas as to how the brain works, how we learn. So the logic of the left diagram here is to go down from the top. So we have an external stimulus like me talking and your auditory listening to me, and the visual, you're seeing what's on the screen. You have to pay attention and you have to perceive, make sense of what's being presented to you. And that is happening through what you have in your long-term memory, to be able to associate the words that I'm saying, that they're familiar to you. And therefore, how I organize those words represent ideas that you can make sense of. And we learn new information as we work on a given task through working memory, using our short-term memory, and we can only handle like 6 or 8 bits of information at a time. And in that process of learning, we're trying to bring it to long-term memory to store for later through like rehearsing it, repeating it over and over, organizing it, putting it into categories, and then elaboration, which is the idea of using imagery. If you're a visual learner, that would be big. And then, of course, there's different kinds of long-term memory, declarative like facts, conditional, how to, if then, and then procedural is how to do things. And there's also like episodic memory, like 9/11. We all remember what happened 9/11. That was a very emotional, rich day and all that it represented and what happened. Um, so, again, for the typically achieving student, all these systems work pretty fluidly, really well, easily, don't require much energy. And of course, we want to have as much energy as we can to read through or listen to or write as much as we can of the given kind of activity that we're being asked to do. So if the process of making sense of that external stimuli and what it might mean in terms of our long-term memory is costing us 80% of our gas tank, then we only have 20% left to try to manage through the reading, through the writing, through the listening, whatever it might be as the task. And therefore, those students get much less done, and they just can't manage as much as others. And over time, the loss, the reduction, right, gets bigger and bigger cumulatively. So it's a challenging concept and idea to try to get through, especially when you're meeting with parents as a special education teacher and part of the other school team members when you're sharing the information from assessments that the child has a learning disability. And it's often heartbreaking, and tears can start, and it's the beginning of the parents' process of trying to understand what does that mean. And it's not just learning disability, any kind of cognitive kind of disability, intellectual disability, autism, even attention deficit hyperactivity disorder with the attention component. I mean, all those things kind of impact. The diagram on the right is a more recent diagram creation of what educational psychologists think. There's less detail, but I guess it focuses more on the key components, and maybe that was its purpose, was to be less complicated. But I wanted to emphasize here in the bottom left, the blue box, there are challenges here to keep in mind, and that's learned helplessness. So when a student hasn't had success through elementary school with writing, for example, they're going to be less willing to stay focused, to try to improve with writing in middle and high school grades, likely. And then you can imagine what that means when they arrive at college, university. And the paired with that is to be able to manage through Common Core state standards and the kinds of classroom activities that are mapped to that, it requires, a definite amount of drive, of initiative, of work ethic, of applying yourself. And students with learned helplessness often don't have that. And they easily become bored because they just haven't had a lot of success with this in the past, and why should I try again? And it becomes a repetitive negative cycle that is part of my current research with some STEM colleagues in Pullman to try to figure out ways to break that cycle and to help them be able to try to improve, even if it's a paragraph, maybe not the entire assignment. Can we at least get them to focus, to try to apply some energy into improving the text of that first paragraph? So I'm just curious, like here on the right, what helps you to focus? What helps you to remember facts and concepts? And what kind of learner are you? Auditory, visual? Any thoughts?
Well, personally, I know I do well with visual representations, whether that's it, a diagram or a short summary, um, just to draw my attention back to what we were discussing, right? Or with the process of whatever it is your content you're learning. Just hearing it sometimes it's difficult because recency effect hits and you get lost in your thoughts, or but having something that's more permanent there that isn't intimidating, like a dense, I mean, that's why journal articles have abstracts, right? So we can see it, access it. Oh yeah, that's what it was about. And that when we're doing our writing, shoot, we'll have 50 articles cited. Sometimes it's hard to remember what each one was. So to go back and have annotations or whatever, just brief snippets to jog my memory helps.
Isn't the VARC model stuff kind of falling out of favor a little bit though? And kind of moving more towards like various subjects are better as visual or audio or kinesthetic rather than the person. I kind of got a lot of researchers kind of going that way. It's more towards the subject, not the person.
Okay.
Yeah, but the kinesthetic integration is super important when learning things. There's a whole, like in language learning, there's total physical response, that you associate a movement with something. It doesn't have to be a vocab word, it could be a book. There's some really good comments here in the chat too about associating it with music or with text to speech, so it's auditory, and applying that, making them associate it with something related but not the same as just writing it.
Sometimes too, I might draw a picture to kind of sum up what it's about in like the corner. So like we were talking about how there's a lot of research articles and things like that. If I have them physically printed, I might draw like a little picture to kind of sum up the main point that I wanted to focus on. That typically helps me as well.
Oh, good. Yeah, visuals are a huge help to many children in today's visual media driven age for sure. They help me because if I understood Eric correctly, I too, like auditory alone is really hard for me. And high school was a lot of auditory. I know there was the writing of the answers to the chapter questions, but that's not necessarily the most helpful way to integrate, commit key concepts to long-term memory. I'm a great visual learner, and sort of mixing them up, like a bit of auditory, talking about the image, would be really helpful to me. moving around, discussing with others, interacting with the model or the concept, kinesthetic, tactile. So I really like Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. It makes so much sense to me, and I really benefit from that. So whenever we can, as instructors or as we're learning, I think apply those things. It's really helpful. Yeah, so in talking about writing and movement, this is an article that I found recently because there is this debate about keyboarding versus handwriting, paper pencil. And are we losing something by not employing paper pencil with students as much as we used to, offering them physical books, being able to feel and move the pages, using your finger to scan as you read down the page, whatever it might be. Is there more benefit to that than what we thought, and so quickly embraced tablets and computers and laptops and ebooks when interacting, handwriting, as opposed to keyboarding, could be helping a lot of students. So it's certainly something to think about. And I wrote here in the green box, like, what is it about tactile feedback that gives people a sense of comfort? That sort of haptic feedback, like the click of a trackpad or the ding sound when you get a notification. Does the sense of touch improve learning, even for students who struggle possibly? And, the idea of providing information, representing it in different ways, offering different kinds of experiences to really change up the engagement. Anyone have like a preference for paper pencil or use paper pencil along with your laptop for different purposes?
Yeah, I keep notebooks for everything.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's a sense of it's mine. I did that. I know what I wrote. It's also a sense of it is mine. It's not like once you put it digitally, you don't know where that's going. I mean,
Mm.
even if it's in your hard drive, who knows?
Right.
But I'll look back and then I'll be like, I spelled that incorrect. It's a little thing, but I don't worry about that when I'm just freehand writing.
Mm.
But I enjoy that because you can make it
Mm.
your own and draw your own bubbles, and sometimes it's quicker.
Sure.
I definitely think that I retain more physically writing it as opposed to typing it.
Okay.
There have been multiple studies, and I'm sorry I don't have them right now, but note taking on laptop versus writing, the writing is far more effective, except in areas where it's like very specific fact recall. It's like 1492 Christopher Columbus sailed across. Those kinds of things were better. But if anything that had to do with concepts and relationships, their handwriting was far more effective for note taking. And another one I remember about generic reading comprehension, they tested people on computers versus paper. They'd read the exact same material, and the people who read on paper had far better reading comprehension. And remember, that paper came out before tablets, so it'd be interesting to see that redone. I've not looked it up, but that was a long time ago. I remember reading that. Just reading on paper and a physical media was far more effective than reading on a computer screen.
I had recently, oh, go ahead.
Nope, you go.
Well, I had recently bought a Remarkable and the real feel tablets. And something that I'm really appreciating about it, it brings some of the joy back to writing, but there's something about, writing by paper, pencil, pen. There's like a cadence to it. Like there's a flow, a little bit of a beat, and you also hear like there's a sound to it as well as a feel. And I actually think the sound on the Remarkable is a little bit more pronounced, and I love it. I appreciate it. But I also, like others, I definitely feel like there's a memory, and I don't know if it's muscle or what it is, but there's a memory, a retention of concepts when I'm writing it on my end, and comprehension that I maybe don't get when I'm just typing.
I really smell books in there.
So, like the smell of books?
I love the smell of books.
Yeah, I've heard people say that too. I love my e-reader. I love my iPad. It's less to lug, and I have all my ebooks with me all the time, and I can search for a word within an ebook. I don't know. Ebooks work well for me. So I know it's different people have different preferences, which is great, but I'll look up Remarkable and research that more. That sounds interesting to me because the School for the Blind have been waiting for a tablet that provides tactile feedback so that they could do Braille on the tablet. So we're still waiting for tablets that can manage the Braille like 3-dot things so that the students can feel them as they go across the page. They have quite the resource library. I don't know what to compare it to in Pullman. It's probably the size of one of the floors of the Cleveland building, and it's all paper-bound textbooks that they have made or they've exchanged with other School for the Blinds and people from across the US, maybe other countries can borrow them when students need a given textbook. But a textbook is like 2 feet thick because of the Braille. It just requires so much paper. And they have a Braille type thing there too, where they're making books. It's interesting to see if you ever have the opportunity, how writing is managed for people with blind and low vision is the phrase that they would really prefer. They don't like the phrase visual impairments. They would rather blind and low vision is what they like. So universal design for learning, topic that we hear a lot about, really promoted in education. There's been a lot of presentations, and I've presented on this in recent years. But just to emphasize the importance of the 3 components: engagement, representation, action, and expression, and that we're really trying to, going along the bottom in the red text here, like stimulate interest and to help motivate children and students, present information in different ways. So the multiple intelligences kind of idea. And then different ways that students can express what they know. And, if it is a writing assignment, to me, it's providing choice is what I really like to do. Because I think students are more motivated to write when they're writing on a topic that is of preference to them. So, whoops, that's kind of my thinking about that. So looking at engagement, again, the choice of topic could be the choice of genre, a literature review versus a research proposal, possibly, that to really optimize the relevance, value, and authenticity of the task and of the components. And then to help sustain effort and persistence, that we're heightening the importance of goals and objectives of what the actual point of the assignment is, and that be really clear. That we vary, or rather provide the resources needed to optimize the challenge. Getting back to earlier when I said it's not that everybody gets the same, it's that they get what they need, even if that is different from someone else. Fostering collaboration and community, group work can really help. Peer editing, peer feedback, students choosing their own group, depending upon the personalities of some classes, that can really help. Feedback. So the conversation question, what practices help you to keep engaged in class and with assignments? Is there something else around engagement that you've found really helpful?
Keeping myself engaged, like I wrote before, is taking the articles and turning them into speech so that way I can
Mm.
listen to them.
Mhm.
And then I will do something else at the same time. I know that a lot of people say that you should stay completely focused on what you're doing, but it's easier for me to be doing something like the dishes while I'm listening to it and treating it more as a podcast, and having it be less of a focus. It takes this I don't know, the difficulty off of it for me. Um,
Mhm.
it takes like the tax load off, and then I can focus on what it's actually saying instead of the stress of it being an article like that's so important, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, or to focus on what
You broke up a bit.
oh, it's just doing two things at the same time,
Mhm.
drawing or something not requiring all of my attention,
Mhm.
like the dishes, something easy, um, will help me focus on what I'm listening to listen to it for content instead of just listening to what it's saying.
Mhm. Okay.
I think if you try to make things exciting, it can be
Mhm.
hard. You know, if you're teaching English and you've taught Animal Farm for 20 years, you know, you gotta pretend to make it exciting, you know.
Yeah, I
You
know.
know, just wow, this is amazing, and blah 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 blah. You know,
Yeah.
it's like
Hype. Yeah,
might be fun the first couple of years, but you gotta force that excitement later on.
I know. Yeah, I think that's where social media can help, visuals can help. Um, if it's some way you can bring in a recent article related to the topic, especially something from their students, university students, like typical reading, that could really help. But
Yeah.
yeah, I know what you're saying.
Multiple means of assessment that
Hmm.
allows students to choose
Right,
their
right,
assessment form.
right. I do too. Some people feel that, well, how do I grade if everybody's doing something different? So how am I going to know how the class did overall unless everybody does the same thing? And I'm, I don't know. I'm less worried about that. I'm more interested in the learning that they do, as opposed to me having some level of, I guess, theoretical consistency to be able to judge my grading. But
I think that helps to focus what do we really want. It's like use
mhm,
Animal Farm. We really want them to know the characters and how they progressed and learned. How
right.
they do that. Do they make a magazine from the area? Do this standard book report or um, some other outlines and interactive things that they can do? Make up their own fan fiction that they wouldn't be able to do unless they knew those characters well, right?
Mhm,
So the multiple means of assessment, but there's still one core thing that you're testing on.
right.
I don't know if you can
Yeah, for
identify that.
if we're assessing, progress towards goals or learning objectives,
Mhm,
allowing choice in
mhm,
showing how we, deciding how we're going to show what we know, doesn't hinder our assessment of progress towards learning goals.
mm,
Yeah, I think that's for me, that's as a learner, that's a really big one, being able to choose how I'm going to show what I know. And let's face it, some content is really boring and it's hard
mm,
to make exciting, but I can get excited maybe about the Kahoot that I'm going to
right.
create that's
Yeah.
going to show my progress towards goals, and had
Mhm.
quite a lot of success with working with pre-service teachers and teaching the Ed Psych assessment course, and allowing them to decide how they're going to show what they know. And really, I think for their own practice, it helps them really think about, wait, what am I assessing? I'm assessing progress towards a learning target. And it doesn't really have anything to do with the mode of assessment. It has to do with the content and skills that were developed through the process. So anyway, yeah.
No, that's good. Thank you. Mm. As I mentioned before, mnemonic strategies. So for students who have difficulty managing a task, they're not a good reader, they don't analyze high quality text. So when it comes to an assignment or writing a task, they just don't know where to start. They don't have an idea of what the topic might be, etc. So for students who struggle with a cognitive skill, mnemonic strategies can be really helpful. It lays out like a sequence of what to do first, what to do second, etc. Usually like 3 to 5 steps is best, in my opinion. There are mnemonic strategies that have 6, 8, 11 steps, because one of the key components of mnemonics is that the student be able to memorize them. Because once they're memorized, it helps it to be a more fluid, efficient, quicker kind of process. And therefore, they're able to spend less time on remembering what the steps are because they become so automatic that they can then devote that extra energy into the writing, the reading, the learning, whatever it might be. So this was one of my first mnemonics when I first came to WSU in 2005 that I created. And I will just be clear up front that very little in education is revolutionary or completely new. We're often taking ideas and reconfiguring them into something else or altering them into a new kind of component or aspect. Um, this one is art. So it was the emphasis on illustrating their story ideas before they started writing words and sentences. So I really felt that if they could devote some mental energy just to the ideas, so they would have an outline that's an image as opposed to words that they had difficulty spelling, that they can more easily go back to that image and rethink, joggle their memory as to a new idea that they could create words and sentences to add to their text to have a better draft over time. So hence the art kind of title. So the first step was to ask the key questions about a story: who's in it, when, where, what happens, etc. And then reflect on those questions and illustrate their answers in a drawing. And then they move to generating their text and making edits for a final copy. So these kind of things have been very helpful. And the way to teach a new strategy, and again, not that this is revolutionary and never been heard of before, but in the realm of special education, Graham and Harris are a husband and wife team at Arizona State University, Steve Graham and Karen Harris, and they're in their 70s and they're still working. And apparently you're just going to continue working. I recently spoke with Steve Graham. He's 70 something and just going to keep going. But they developed these 6 steps to teach a new strategy like a mnemonic. So looking at what the student is able to do recently, their background knowledge. Number 2 is meeting with the student and discussing the new strategy. 3 is the teacher cognitively modeling the strategy and speaking all the inner thoughts you would have as you go about, applying the strategy and to show the student how to do it. Number 4 is having that student commit to memorizing those steps. And then number 5 is the teacher and student working through the steps of the strategy multiple times to get more practice. And hopefully arriving at number 6, where the student is able to do at least part of or a good basic outcome of the intention of the strategy, so that they can then maintain it over time. so that in the days and weeks to come, they can apply the strategy more on their own and be able to be more self-sufficient, called self-regulation. That they're able to manage that task now on their own, that they can self-regulate through the activity. So this is the process that we often use when we're teaching a new strategy, mnemonic, to students. So these are some of the ones that I've created. I mentioned the art one on the left, and then the story one is a similar sequence, but think about your answers, the second step, and illustrate them, and then say your story aloud before you start typing your text. And then this one on the right is about argumentative writing. This is the one I used at the school for the blind study I did. So analyze, read, reflect on some example argumentative essay texts and how they're structured, then review keywords and create sentences and phrases with websites and apps as content that they could then integrate into their own essay. Generate that plan of how to argue your ideas, what ideas help to illustrate your argument. Say it aloud orally to help finesse your sequence, and then creating that first draft with typed text. So when we do a study like this, we normally like to get an idea of how students are doing with content and quality of the given kind of text. In this case, it was story writing with the story mnemonic. So we get a baseline of how students are doing with content and quality in their text. And then the white boxes here are where they learn that new strategy using the SRSD 6 steps I just mentioned. And then we have them apply that new strategy with additional stories. And again, we score them for content and quality over time. And hopefully we see an increasing level and trend as time passes. They get better and better. But that doesn't always happen, or at least for one of the two components, content or quality, in what they write. And about a week after we finish seeing the student, we come back and ask them to write one more story to see if they've maintained the strategy in memory. So this one was the speaking, I think, of the text that they wrote. And then is it the next one? It's the actual written content. Somewhere here I had a title for each, but I'm not seeing it. But that's kind of the idea. So this is one example of how mnemonic strategies can help children improve over time. If we really try to teach them a way to do it and to manage it, they can improve. I mentioned about the rounds of feedback. Another thing about the different ways to go about teaching of writing comes from a meta-analysis that Graham and colleagues did in 2012. So they look at all the research studies around the different ways to teach writing, and then they calculate an effect size. And so you can see how each one of these different ways of going about the teaching of writing, to what degree does it help? So strategy instruction really helps. So the 6 steps of SRSD really help. Teaching grammar alone, isolated, doesn't help. So just that rote kind of learning, which I did in grade 11 or 12, very monotonous, and you had to take tests. And if you didn't pass the test, you had to redo the whole thing, and which never happened to me, thankfully. But oof, really hard. But this gives you an idea of how different ways of teaching writing kind of compare. Okay, time for another breakout room. So in thinking about UDL then, what do you find helpful in UDL, or what kind of UDL lingering questions do you have? Again, thinking about writing. So again, 10 minutes in random groups of up to 4. And that's the Menti info.
So go ahead and take a picture of the prompt. 3. Okay, we'll see you in a bit. Okay, Michael, go ahead and unmute.
Sorry, I forget about that. Time has really passed, and I really did want to get to the last activity, so I feel like I need to jump, I guess, skip some of the slides. This next part here was just sentence combining ideas, activities that K through 12, or maybe as a video or short fun activity, some instructors might find helpful. Just like one example, taking 2 sentences and how to make them into one, to make writing more concise, to make it more interesting. So these next few slides were just some examples of, and this one's adjectives and adverbs, compound subjects and objects, using connecting words like and, but, using the possessive case. Again, it's probably very standard for people who are typically achieving or high-level writers. But for that 75% of students who struggle with writing, these kind of activities periodically, as a few minutes of practice, can be really helpful. Using relative clauses, just different ways to make sentences more interesting, to make it less, I went here, then I went there, then I went here, then I went there. End of story. Thank you. Goodbye. It's not as interesting when we do it that way. And this one was the use of poetry. Jack was tall, but Laura was short. Laura was short, but Jack was tall. Taller was Jack than Laura, that kind of thing. So not necessarily a sentence structure we'd use in just any kind of type of writing assignment, but having variety and a resource set of choices to use can be really helpful. Parts of the paragraph, important to be aware of in editing and revising. Of course, very important. Web tools that can help, different technology tools that can help, like web apps, like I mentioned, word prediction software, different kinds of mnemonic strategies here for how to write a paragraph exist, and these kinds of resources can help. Of course, there's lots of things you can get that can help for a price, such as Grammarly. The purchased version, of course, offers more. Was going to spend a minute just showing this video of Steve Graham, one of the researchers I mentioned earlier. He just talks about how AI has come on the scene, and it's a whole new way of writing, right? We have so much more writing content and writing feedback possible. And I took one of my own texts and used some of the different AI tools that exist. Is that the right word? Google Gemini, Copilot, which we have a subscription to through WSU, and another one called Claude that gets mentioned a lot, and asked it to provide content and quality feedback on my paragraph. And it's interesting how each of the 3 provide it, each in their own way, some more concise than others. But it's certainly good feedback. But again, you have, like buying that new car, you have to know what you're looking for. You have to be sure this is what you want, or at the end of the day, this is the text and how it's written is what you actually want it to say. So just, copy pasting is not appropriate. It's plagiarism, and it's not demonstrating the user's skills as a writer, which you really need to have, I think, to be a good consumer of AI. So here we are. So what was asking you to do is in a minute to go to the Scribble Tools website. But this is the suggested content through the interviews that I've done so far with people who work around diversity kind of topics around English language arts and writing. So I'm asking these different university faculty literacy researchers, they could be ESD, lead teachers around diversity and ELA, um, those kinds of people that I've asked so far. This is kind of a summative list of what they've suggested could be added to the online web hub of resources in terms of what are some activities that we could suggest to use writing as a means to engage people around diversity topics. So just kind of questions that people could write about. Who are the people in your community? The idea that community moves forward by know, feel, and do. What do we know? What do we feel? And then what should we do next? Number 3 is what is the description of a school community you know in your area, and using like the OSPI report card to look up those demographics and then kind of write about that. Number 4, how to be respectful to people in your community. What are ways to do that? Number 5, what are accommodations and how can we help with them? And number 6, what information from these web links in number 6 makes you think about community questions you might have. And those were 2 web sources that were provided. So what I'm asking in these last few minutes is in one final breakout room, if you could go to the Scriba Tools website. So if you type in your browser Scriba, Skriba, Tools, WSU, you should see the web page appear, or as a choice in your Google search.
There was a link at the very.
Yeah, this is it here. I can put it in
I just put it in chat. Is that the one?
there. I'll put it in the chat. Thank you. And, there. So I'm asking if you could go to the website and in this Menti offer any kind of feedback, what you would suggest, or anything that could be added. Or is there a particular aspect of writing that you feel, we could add more about that would help you and other people? And then we'll come back for the last 2 minutes of a very quick wrap up.
Well, we'll just do it for 5 minutes.
Okay, 5 minutes, sure.
Yeah, so you can, people can get a feel for it, but then you can unpack some of the initial thoughts.
Sure. Okay, wow. I didn't expect time to go by so fast. To be honest, I thought I would end and there would still be time remaining. But thank you so much for sticking with me to the end. So any kind of concluding thoughts or questions people have?
I like the layout, the potential, right? You have that additional resources pretty fleshed out, the videos and everything. And once you get the different genres in there and more examples and the example, infographics, and this is turning out really, really nice, easy to navigate.
Thank you. Yeah, I should have mentioned a few minutes ago that we're hoping to have 20 resources that we have made within this by the end of June. So that's kind of the goal for there to be at least some content in each one of these kind of whatever these are called, section things. So I have a recent Pullman science graduate who's paid help part-time to do this, but so we have money for her till the end of June and hoping to have as much added. And in addition, will be the more complete list of these ideas that I mentioned a minute ago will be added too. There'll be a section for this kind of content.
One thing I think could be helpful would be, it's just like personally, I think it's helpful to me, although it's not really address like a specific writing skill or something. But I feel like, for example, like if this is open for college students, then writing center resource like that from university would be helpful, even though it's not target any specific writing, but they probably would see that on syllabus. But I feel given it's the website about writing for college students, that might be
No, that's good.
to put
Yeah,
in.
no, that's a great idea. Thank you.
You might also consider some of the AI tools that you mentioned, having a section for that. The Purdue for formatting, maybe an APA and an MLA site.
Yeah, we do have a list of even other universities writing resource web pages that we will be adding. But those are all good ideas. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think that's the end for me. I really appreciate again you all attending. It means a lot. And thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, we appreciate the time you spent in organizing all of this, all the really detailed examples. What we usually do is I'll convert this recording into a YouTube link, and then I have a page where I will post, it's a Padlet where I'll post it, and then also post the PowerPoint and make sure that I have everybody's email address. I'll send that out so that you can see it and have access to these great things that Michael presented. But yeah, Michael, thank you so much. And I appreciate everybody spending their late afternoon, early evening with us. And yeah, just keep an eye out for the Padlet, the video, and please share with your colleagues and anybody who else might be interested.
Wonderful. Thank you.